On the morning of the 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, arrived in the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo. His visit was intended as a display of imperial strength. By the afternoon, the Archduke and his wife Sophie lay dying, shot by a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. Within 37 days, Europe's great powers had mobilized their armies and plunged into a war that would kill nearly 10 million soldiers, topple 4 empires, and permanently shatter the old world order. The assassination was the spark, but it ignited a continent already stacked high with explosive materials. The causes of the First World War were deep, complex and interlocking, a web of militarism, alliance systems, imperial rivalries, and fervent nationalism that had been woven over decades. This video explains those causes, tracing how a regional crisis in the Balkans escalated into the first truly global industrial war. If you're enjoying this journey through history, please give the video a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. The long-term undercurrents, an unstable equilibrium for much of the 19th century, the great powers of Europe had managed to avoid a continent-wide war. The Concert of Europe, established after the Napoleonic Wars, provided a framework for diplomatic crisis management. But by the early 1900s, that framework was crumbling under the weight of profound structural changes. 4 interconnected forces had been building for decades: militarism, the alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism, the cult of the offensive between 1890 and 1914, the great powers engaged in an unprecedented arms race. The most visible and dangerous dimension was the Anglo-German naval rivalry. Kaiser Wilhelm II, who dismissed the elderly Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in 1890 and pursued a more aggressive foreign policy, decided that Germany needed a high seas fleet to challenge British naval supremacy. Britain, whose national security depended on its navy, responded in kind. The British launched the revolutionary Dreadnought battleship in 1906, and Germany immediately began building its own. By 1914, Britain had 29 dreadnoughts, Germany had 17. But the naval race was only one part of a broader militarization. The armies of Europe had also doubled in size. Germany's army expanded from 500,000 in 1890 to 840,000 in 1914, France's from 540,000 to 827,000, Russia's from 800,000 to 1,300,000, with an astonishing 3 million reservists. This military build-up was accompanied by a dangerous ideology, the cult of the offensive. Military planners across Europe believed that future wars would be short, decisive, and won by the side that struck first and hardest. The German Schlieffen Plan, named after its architect General Alfred von Schlieffen, assumed that Germany would face a two-front war against France and Russia. The plan called for a massive right wing to sweep through neutral Belgium, encircle Paris within 6 weeks, and then turn east to face the slow mobilizing Russian army. Every other general staff had similar timetables. Mobilization schedules were so rigidly precise that once the order was given, it was virtually impossible to stop. This railway war mentality meant that political leaders felt immense pressure to act quickly. Hesitation could mean defeat. The alliance system, a house of cards. The second long-term cause was the system of alliances that divided Europe into 2 armed camps. The system began with Bismarck's web of treaties designed to isolate France after its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, 1870–71, and to preserve German security. But Bismarck's system collapsed after his dismissal. In 1894, France and Russia, 2 nations with little love for each other but a shared fear of Germany, signed a military convention. The Franco-Russian alliance meant that Germany now faced the prospect of a two-front war. Germany responded by strengthening its ties with Austria-Hungary. The dual alliance of 1879 became the Triple Alliance when Italy joined in 1882. The decisive counterweight emerged in 1904, when Britain and France settled their long-standing colonial rivalries in the Entente Cordiale. Though not a formal military alliance, it marked a dramatic rapprochement. In 1907, Britain and Russia signed the Anglo-Russian Convention, resolving their disputes in Persia and Central Asia. Together, these agreements formed the Triple Entente: Britain, France, and Russia. By 1914, Europe was divided into two rigid alliance blocs. A conflict involving any one member of either bloc carried the risk of dragging in all the others. As the British Foreign Secretary, Sir Edward Grey, famously observed, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." The alliance system was supposed to deter war by ensuring that aggression would be met by overwhelming force. Instead, it transformed a local quarrel into a continental conflagration. Imperialism, global rivalries feed European tensions. The third long-term cause was the fierce imperial competition that had characterized the late 19th century. The scramble for Africa, the race for concessions in China, and the rivalry for influence in the Ottoman Empire created constant diplomatic crises. These crises, at Fashoda, 1898, between Britain and France, over Morocco, 1905 and 1911, between France and Germany, and over the Bosnian annexation crisis, 1908, between Austria-Hungary and Russia, were resolved without war, but each left behind bitterness and a heightened sense of vulnerability. Imperialism contributed to the outbreak of the Great War in two ways. First, it fueled nationalist resentments, especially among the peoples of the crumbling Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian empires. Second, it encouraged a zero-sum mentality. Any gain for one power was seen as a loss for others. Germany, which had arrived late to the imperial feast, felt it had been denied its place in the sun. This sense of encirclement and grievance made German leaders more willing to take risks. Nationalism, the unruly force. The most volatile of the long-term causes was nationalism. In its constructive form, nationalism had unified Germany and Italy. In its destructive form, it tore empires apart. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, a ramshackle collection of 11 major nationalities, was particularly vulnerable. Slavic peoples, Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, Croats, Serbs, Slovenes, chafed under German and Hungarian dominance. The most militant of these nationalist movements was in Serbia. After gaining independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1878, Serbia dreamed of uniting all South Slavic peoples, Yugoslavia, a vision that meant tearing away the large Slavic populations of Austria-Hungary. Russia, itself a Slavic power, posed as the protector of its smaller Slavic brother Serbia. Russia's support was both ideological, pan-Slavism, and strategic. Russia wanted control of the Turkish Straits and an outlet to the Mediterranean, and it saw Austria-Hungary as its main rival in the Balkans. Germany, for its part, was bound to Austria-Hungary by ties of ethnicity. Both were predominantly German, and by the alliance. The Balkans, as Bismarck had predicted, would be the next trouble spot in Europe. He had famously said that a general war would start, some damned foolish thing in the Balkans. His prediction proved eerily accurate. The immediate trigger, the assassination and the July crisis. On the 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were shot in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Young Bosnia movement, which had received weapons and training from the Black Hand, a Serbian secret society. The assassination was not an act of the Serbian government. Indeed, the Serbian Prime Minister, Nikola Pasic, had warned Vienna of the plot, but it was a product of Serbian irredentist nationalism. Austria-Hungary saw the assassination as an opportunity to crush Serbia once and for all. But the Habsburg leaders knew that an invasion of Serbia risked provoking Russia. So they turned to their German ally. Kaiser Wilhelm II and his Chancellor, Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, issued the so-called blank check, a promise of unconditional German support for whatever action Austria-Hungary took. The German leadership calculated that a local war was winnable and that Russia was still unprepared for a major conflict. They also believed that Britain would remain neutral. Every one of these calculations would prove catastrophically wrong. Emboldened by the blank check, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia on the 23rd of July. The terms were deliberately harsh. Serbia was to suppress all anti-Austrian propaganda, dismiss officials named by Vienna, and allow Austrian officials to participate in the investigation of the assassination. Serbia, desperate to avoid war, accepted almost all terms, but not the demand that Austrian officials operate on Serbian soil. This was the excuse Vienna needed. On the 28th of July, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, bound by ties of Slavic kinship and strategic interest, ordered partial mobilization against Austria-Hungary. The Russian military, however, had no plan for partial mobilization. The only effective plan was full mobilization against both Austria-Hungary and Germany. On the 30th of July, Tsar Nicholas II, after agonizing hesitation, ordered full mobilization. Germany, which had promised to support Austria-Hungary, now saw Russian mobilization as a mortal threat. The Schlieffen Plan required Germany to attack France before turning on Russia. On the 1st of August, Germany declared war on Russia. On the 3rd of August, it declared war on France. The next day, German troops marched into neutral Belgium, whose neutrality had been guaranteed by treaty. Britain, which had remained ambiguous about its intentions, was presented with an unambiguous casus belli, the violation of Belgian neutrality. On the 4th of August, Britain declared war on Germany. Within a week, most of Europe was at war. Conclusion: a war that no one wanted, yet everyone started. The causes of the First World War were neither simple nor singular. The long-term currents, militarism, the alliance system, imperial rivalry, and nationalism, created a continent primed for explosion. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand provided the spark, but the explosion was only possible because the powder keg had been packed so tightly. The July crisis of 1914 revealed a catastrophic failure of diplomacy. Decision-makers across Europe believed that a war, if it came, would be short and glorious. They were wrong. The industrialized slaughter of the trenches, the collapse of empires, and the bitter legacy of Versailles all flowed from those fateful weeks. In the end, no single nation bore sole responsibility. Germany's blank check and Schlieffen Plan, Austria-Hungary's reckless ultimatum, Russia's premature mobilization, France's eagerness to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine, and Britain's ambiguous commitment to continental affairs all contributed. The Great War was not inevitable, but once the mobilization orders were signed, the rigid timetables and the psychology of the offensive made it almost impossible to stop. The lamps that went out in 1914 would not be relit, and the world has never been the same. Thank you for watching. If you found this history valuable, please like and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective and keep the conversation going.